येषां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि. Namaste and welcome to Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam or KYG for this class in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I'm sitting in the premises of yet another ancient temple known as the SivaYoginathar. More about this temple in another video. In this class, we shall study Sutra number 12. If there is one sutra, and there are a few that we take home at the end of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra study, if there is one that I have taken home among 3 or 4 others that we will come across, it is this one, Sutra 12. What does the sutra say? The sutra goes like this. Abhyasa-vairāgyābhyāṃ tannirodhaḥ. A very beautiful aphorism. Of course, Patanjali now explains this aphorism in the next 4 aphorisms, explains a little more. For those of us who are wondering, after listening to the previous sutras, especially the ones on the 5 vrittis, the 5 types of vrittis, we might be scratching our head, like I did many years ago, and I still do, as to, oh my God, there are so many of these vrittis. How does one stop them? Where does one take the first step? How does one even get to this? And it is in this sutra that Patanjali opens the doors to that possibility. As I said, Patanjali Yoga Sutras is divided into 4 sections broadly. And this is purely a theoretical, conceptual section or pada or chapter, if you will, which is called the Samadhi Pada, the first 51 sutras. But nevertheless, these are not watertight compartments as one would expect in a modern text, if you will. Even in the Samadhi Pada, Patanjali opens doors for some practice at some level. Then, of course, comes the sadhana pada, where he gets into more details. So this sutra gives us an idea as to how to get to these vrittis, so that we can begin to put the state of Nirodha, or at least a state of ekagra, in the radar, if you will. Otherwise, if we just go on into these concepts, we get lost and it becomes a matter of indigestion, if you will. We won't be able to digest after a point. It will be like, oh God, same old, Purusha, Prakriti, I can't take it after a point. And it's natural. I've been there, done that. So Patanjali, as a grand teacher that he was, knew. So in the first 11 sutras, he has set the basis. The first 4, he defined what yoga was, and in the next 7 or so, he discussed the vrittis. Now he opens the doors to some element of practice that you and I can relate. And therefore, this sutra, abhyasa-vairāgyābhyāṃ tannirodhaḥ. What does this sutra mean? There are 2 important words, 3 in fact. One is abhyasa, the second one is vairagya, and the third one is nirodha. So nirodha, that state, can be attained, he says in this sutra, by 2 means. One is abhyasa. Abhyasa can be popularly defined as practice, a word that we can all relate to. Practice, effort. In Sanskrit, the word is sadhana. Sadhana. You do sadhana, which is practice, which is putting effort in the direction of what? Of Nirodha. So that is one. The second one, he says, is along with abhyasa, he opens the doors to our thinking towards Vairagya. Vairagya, the second word, means non-attachment. It means dispassion. And of course, the third word is Nirodha. So in essence, what he says is the state of Nirodha can be achieved when we undertake these two things. One is practice, putting in effort, abhyasa, but with a sense of dispassion, detachment, non-attachment, however we want to call it. I'm throwing these words so we get a better idea, because none of these Sanskrit terms can truly be explained in one equivalent English word. Abhyasa and Vairagya. These has many, many implications. And that is why I rely on Vyasa's commentary, because it provides me and all of us, as we go in this path, a basis from which we can develop our thoughts. So what does Abhyasa say about this? The first word that struck me from Vyasa's commentary is he uses the word Chitta Nadi, the river that is Chitta. See, that's an amazing thing, because we think Chitta, and we have talked about Chitta as a basket, as a virtual basket, and maybe at some level in our visualization of what a Chitta could be, in that Vikalpa kind of imaginative vritti that we kind of frame Chitta, it might be a static idea in our head. Nirodha itself might be a static goal in our head, right? All that gets redefined and more refined rather as we study the sutras, because it's not a static goal to be reached. Nevertheless, Chitta here, Vyasa for the very first time in the commentary uses the word Chitta Nadi. What does Chitta Nadi means? Nadi means river. The river that is Chitta. The river that is Chitta. I think right there we need to pause and think Chitta is a river. And just as any big river in any part of this globe, and I will take the example of river Ganges or river Kaveri, which is just a couple of kilometers away from this temple. This river Kaveri that is flowing has little tributaries that keep feeding into the river, that helps its flow towards its goal, right? And these little tributaries can be considered as our vrittis that keep coming in and feeding into this chitta that is flowing. So it is a slightly different perspective as to how we could look into the chitta. And why do we do that? Because Vyasa calls it Chitta Nadi. So in this Chitta Nadi that is flowing towards where? Towards the state of Nirodha, tannirodhaḥ, tad-nirodhaḥ. So to achieve Nirodha, Patanjali says, in this flow, we have two practices. One is the practice of practice itself, abhyasa, and the other one is Vairagya. So abhyasa and Vairagya, these are the two rivers that are little tributaries, if you will, not little, but two main tributaries, arteries, if you will, feed into this Chitta Nadi, and this Chitta Nadi is flowing. And these in turn are fed by other things, like abhyasa or practice can be fed by so many other things, right? What kind of practices and all of that, that is flowing into the Chitta. Then on this side you have dispassion, Vairagya, which again is little streams, little rivers, all our little practices of dispassion comes into that, and that feeds into Chitta Nadi and flows. So Vyasa in his commentary, using this analogy of a river or Nadi, uses practice and dispassion, abhyasa and vairagya, both as little streams that feed into the Chitta Nadi. Now, it could be seen as if these are two opposing forces. To some extent, they are, and we will come to that in a bit. But I see both of them as feeding into the Chitta Nadi. I will call it Chitta Nadi. I love that concept and term. Chitta means the substratum of our mental faculties, if you will, and the Nadi is a flow. So the mental faculties are a flow that is going towards Nirodhaḥ. So they are feeding into the Chitta Nadi. What does Vyasa call these rivers that feed in? So he says the rivers that feed into the Chitta Nadi, one is Vahati Kalyanaya. Vahati means the flow of Kalyanaya, the flow of welfare. Welfare flow. When our efforts are aimed towards Nirodha, the highest state, that is the next stage in evolution, right? That is the right direction. We have to find our way home. So he says that is the path of welfare. We commonly think welfare is for others, but here Vyasa gives us the idea that welfare is everything auspicious, everything good, for our ultimate good for ourselves, for our evolution. We go Vahati Kalyanaya. So Vahati Kalyanaya is the abhyasa. Let's hold on to that thought. And the other one, take a deep breath. He says Vahati Papaya. The other flow that feeds into Chitta is Vahati Papaya. Vahati we know is flow. What is Papa? Papa is sin. Now we might say, wait a minute, you said no religion, and now what is the sudden sin and merit and all of that? So that's why I said take a deep breath. This is not the sin that we study in religion. This is not the sin where you need to go and seek forgiveness or feel guilty about it. It's not that. Where does this word sin come then? Why does Vyasa use the word sin? And I'm going to take a slight diversion here and borrow from a very esoteric text called the Law of Miracles, if you will. It's an esoteric writing of the teachings of Christ. And in that, they talk of the original sin. And they say the original sin is separation. In our case, in Vedanta, while it's not defined so clearly, at least in the text that I have read, so don't ask me to quote it, but the general understanding is the fact that I feel I am separate from God is based on ignorance, and ignorance or avidya or ajnana is a form of sin. Not that we do it consciously. That's why I said it's not from the point of view of religion, but or ethics or morality, but the sin is the fundamental problem that is causing all the other things. Ignorance is the fundamental sin. The lie that I have told myself that I am Sundar is the fundamental sin that I have committed. And then whatever Sundar does or doesn't do is all based on that one fundamental lie, that who is Sundar? Is Sundar just this body? Or is Sundar an instrument through which the jiva is experiencing this? And who is the jiva? Jiva itself is an expression of the divine consciousness that is simply playing this game of life and death. So the fact that I redefine myself, that's in that context Vyasa refers to, and that is my humble understanding, that is sin. So he talks of a flow of sin, papati. And the reason why I come to this understanding is, he talks about what is this flow of papati. This flow which is coming is a flow that is gathering momentum every time we turn our attention towards objects that are ephemeral, towards experiences that are transitory in nature, towards these false identifications, towards things that occupy our senses most of the time, and then we keep going back again and again. We like a sweet, we keep going back to the sweet, hoping to get the same experience that we did the first time we bit into that sweet. But you and I know there is the law of diminishing marginal utility as explained in economics. that the first time it's very good, the second times perhaps it's even better, but then from the third bite onwards or the third sweet onwards, there is a diminishing utility from that very experience. It applies to almost all our senses. We love to listen to a song, we love to listen to a chant. The first time it's beautiful and miraculous and peaceful. The second time it's perhaps even a little better, but then the third time, fourth time, as we go on repeating the same thing, there is an element of saturation that happens, and therefore the diminishing marginal utility comes, and at a point we'll get so frustrated with it that we'll say, I don't want to hear that music or chant anymore. It's the same thing with taste or even sight. All of these, correct? So we constantly keep going there, hoping that we will get some more out of these sensual experiences, sensory experiences. Vyasa calls that the flow of sin, because that is constantly reinforcing the false idea of who we think we are, or who we define, how we define ourselves is constantly being redefined in a false sense. And that unreal existence that you and I are living, and then we share it with our children. So we are living on a borrowed idea. We share it with each other through education, through training, and whatever it is, through conversations. And so we live on a borrowed idea. And that is my understanding of Vyasa calls it the vahati papaya, the flow that takes you towards sin. The other side is the flow that takes you towards welfare. So these are the two flows that are feeding into the Chitta Nadi. All right. Where does abhyasa and dispassion, practice and Vairagya, or abhyasa and Vairagya fit into this idea that Vyasa is explaining to us in his commentary? He says your practice should be towards vahati kalyanaya. Your abhyasa, the practice, all your efforts should be aimed towards strengthening this river that feeds into the chitta. If that same practice is directed towards material objects, material things, then we miss the boat. And it becomes vahati papaya. So he says, ensure that the practices are flowing towards the ultimate good or ultimate welfare. He calls it kalyanaya. Then what about this flow of papa, this vahati papaya, this other materialistic thing that constantly we are feeding it, right? What do we do with that? He says that is where we practice vairagya, dispassion. So when we are engaged in the world, if you will, engaged in sensory experiences, then that is where we need to bring in dispassion, vairagya. We refrain from indulgences to begin with, because that reinforces a false sense of idea that is where the true joy is, because that's what we are seeking, right? In a sweet dish that we eat, we are seeking not just simply a pleasure, but somewhere deep inside we are seeking that joy that will last forever, and we are seeking it in the senses. So when we go towards the senses, when we engage the senses in our functioning of the day-to-day world, which is a must, which is important, we have to bring in the quality of vairagya, dispassion. Dispassion is you're neither liking it nor disliking it. There is no attachment, there is no hatred, there is no raga, craving, there is no dvesha. So there is no hatred or craving, there's no extremes there. There is just a sense of, for the lack of any other word at this point, the word that comes to me is a kind of an indifference. Think of an actor. Because Vairagya is a very important concept here. How do we function in the world then? Think of an actor. An actor is playing his role very well. Okay, when he cries, you get tears in your eyes. When he is laughing, you laugh with him. So he is portraying that character through his acting extremely well. But the actor who is doing that role knows he is not that particular character that he is portraying. He knows he is someone else. But at that moment, he is playing his role so well that it seems that he is that. So to me, that idea of an actor helps me understand how should I practice Vairagya. How do I bring Vairagya into my life? Dispassion, non-attachment. One thing I want to make it clear for many of us who have been exposed to these terms is it is certainly not running away from duties that you practice Vairagya, non-attachment. It is certainly not running away from your family, giving up your job simply because you're frustrated with it. Either you're frustrated with your relationships or frustrated with a loss that has happened materially or something that has upset you, and because of that, you get a sense of detachment and you say, okay, I'm going to give up everything and seek something else. Running away from one's duties is certainly not Vairagya. That is simply what I would call a knee-jerk response to a situation that currently seems out of our control. We cannot handle a situation, it just seems so frustrating and stressful, so we run away from it. That is not dispassion, that is not Vairagya, that is simply running away from it. We are not practicing or learning anything from that. Dispassion is staying in the midst of the storm and feeling the calmness around. Why? Because you are not part of the storm. You have never been part of the storm. The real you is doing this as a Leela. The Purusha, it's a Leela of the Purusha. So when we take that attitude into our life, then the Jiva in Sundar is playing a role of a Sundar in this lifetime. The Jiva, the seer, if you will, understands and accepts the culture that is given to it for this lifetime, the birthplace, the parents, the livelihood, and the kind of lifestyle and all of that, accepts it, not fights it, accepts it, embraces it, and say, why did I get this? Why did I choose this life? What role do I have to play in this life as Sundar? And once that is understood, then the Jiva or the seer begins to play the role of Sundar fearlessly. Sundar may be rich, Sundar may be poor, Sundar may be healthy, Sundar may be sick. The role has to be played, so let it play. But the seer can always withdraw to his real self at any point. And that knowing that there is a higher self automatically helps. Now this false idea of Sundar. So automatically helps Sundar practice dispassion. So Vahati Papaya is restraining that flow of sin, which that restraining comes because of dispassion, Vairagya. The other one is putting all the efforts, replacing this dispassion with now efforts without passion, efforts aimed towards the ultimate welfare. So, abhyasa and vairagya, seemingly opposite forces, but nevertheless both are very important, perhaps forms the two pillars, which is why even in the Bhagavad Gita, for those of you who have studied it, in the 6th chapter, Lord Krishna talks about this in great detail, about practice and dispassion. Nevertheless, if you for those of you who are in the Hindu culture, we know there is Lord Ganesha, who is the symbol of the Mooladhara chakra. He opens the door right at the base of the spine for all creative energies to flow. So he holds two weapons, if you will, in his two hands. And so does Parashakti, the supreme cosmic principle, the Shakti that provides creation or brings forth creation. She also holds the same two weapons. What are they? They call Pasha and Ankusha. Pasha is rope. there is a rope that they hold in one hand, and there is an ankusha that they hold. It's a kind of a prodding stick, if you will. One is a rope and one is a prodding stick. It's also called the goad that they use, the mahut, the elephant trainer uses that. So what are these two? One is a rope. The rope is to stop you from going too much into something. The power, once it opens, the Mooladhara, once Ganesha opens the door, then experiences come in. And when we don't know how to control it, they all go in towards sensory experience, which is what is happening to all of us. Our chakras are all open, but the chakras' experiences is limited to what senses are providing. And therefore, the other parts of our chakras are blocked. We don't even know they exist. Why? Because of this flow which is uncontrolled towards sensory objects or sensory experiences. So Ganesha takes a rope and says, okay, not too far, hold back. So this is dispassion, Vairagya. The rope, Pasha, is to teach us dispassion. Don't go too much into raga, don't get too much into craving, come back. So he holds the devotees, if you will. For those of us who meditate upon him, this is the whole idea. That's why these are all symbols. I always say these are symbols because they mean something very deep. On the other hand, both he and his mother, his mother exists in all the chakras, right? She is the energy, the Kundalini herself. On the other hand, they hold the goading. Goading is prodding stick, if you will. I don't even know goad and goading is a proper English word which is available in a dictionary. At this point, I don't have a reference. But nevertheless, we'll use the word prodding stick. It's a weapon to prod the elephant in one direction. In any direction that the Mahut wants it, he will prod the elephant. So it's a kind of a spear, a small little spear. So she holds it here. This is to prod. Go ahead. Where do we go ahead? In the effort. Vahati kalyanaya. The effort towards the ultimate welfare, we need a prodding stick. And therefore, these gods, if you will, the energies within the Mooladhara and the chakras, prod us towards that effort. But while we are putting that effort, if our efforts get directed towards papa, in other words, towards sensory experiences, then the pasha comes and holds back. So there is a rope that holds you back, there is a prodding stick that prods you. So it is a tug of war, which you and I experience every day, right? But rather than falling into guilt and thinking, oh my God, how do we progress? Understand these energies and say, okay, I just need to focus on this energy and focus on this energy and see how do I navigate between these two seemingly opposing forces and use these forces to my benefit. The forces of abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa-vairāgyābhyāṃ tannirodhaḥ. When we understand this, then and feed the chitta nadi with abhyasa, the right kind of abhyasa, and the right kind of vairagya, then the chitta nadi flows towards nirodha state. So nirodha is a possibility. And Patanjali is opening the doors by allowing us to think on these lines of abhyasa and vairagya. As always, thank you for taking time to watch these videos. Thank you for staying with me in this beautiful journey. It is a great privilege to sit in a temple that is called SivaYoginathar and bring this very important sutra to you all. Until we meet again in the next class, stay blessed, stay inspired. Namaste.
Kaivalya